And let me tell you, I am shocked, I tell you, of the severe narrative change over the course of the past 48 hours. Now the polls are relevant? What the hell's going on, Joe? I thought you told me to not look at the polls.
President Barack Obama reportedly has concerns about President Biden's ability to stay at the top of the ticket. That is what two sources told NBC News. The former president sees Biden's victory as, quote, getting harder. One of the sources said. The Washington Post reports former President Obama has said President Biden needs to seriously consider the viability of his candidacy. And with those comments, finds himself in a situation that is getting more grave.
Yeah, and the Biden camp, though, pushed back.
They did. The Biden camp offered some of the most aggressive pushback, with one source telling NBC News, quote, can we all just remember for a minute that these are the same people who are trying to push Joe Biden out, are the same people who literally gave us all Donald Trump. In 2015, Obama, Pelosi, Schumer pushed Biden aside in favor of Hillary. They were wrong then, and they are wrong now. The source also pouring water on concerns over Biden's poll numbers, pointing to polling back in 2016, the election that showed Hillary Clinton leading Trump by as much as 9 points. That source adding, quote, how did this all work out for everyone back in 2016? Perhaps we should learn a few lessons from 2016. One of them is polls are BS. Just ask Secretary Clinton. And two, maybe, just maybe, Joe Biden is more in touch with actual Americans than Obama, Pelosi, Schumer.
So, John Heilman, this is...
No. Do I remember correctly? Biden refused to run? Well, you do remember the media narrative correctly, but if you were in here, I've talked about this quite a bit. I talked about this in 2020, as a matter of fact. Obama told Joe Biden not to run in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. That's literally what he did. Obama then, I think, for two different reasons. One, because he was terrified of Bernie Sanders, and two, because he felt bad, I guess, about doing that, launched an advocacy campaign for Joe Biden when it was far too late. This
is fascinating because there was sort of a tale of two Biden campaigns yesterday, and a tale of two Democratic parties. You would listen to most of the people that were talking yesterday were suggesting that the president is moving in the direction of getting out of the race. And there's very specific discussions taking place. But you also had campaign officials who aggressively pushed back on the fact. But again, let's be clear here that you have had Schumer, Pelosi, Jeffries, Barack Obama, just about every major Democrat expressing their concern directly to President Biden. Reverend Sharpton, I saw in the New York Times in an article, expressing their concerns that he could lose and he could damage his legacy. And a spate of polls, now even public polls, CBS has him down 5 points. Swing state polls seem to keep going. And
what happened, bro? What happened, Joe? Joe, what's going on? Joe, I am only a Joe Scarborough watcher and nothing else. And let me tell you, I am shocked, I tell you, of the severe narrative change over the course of the past 48 hours. Joe, why are you saying things that are the exact opposite of what you were saying up until 48 hours ago, Joe? Now the polls are relevant? What the hell's going on, Joe? I thought you told me to not look at the polls. I thought you told me it was actually silly that the Democratic Party insiders were operating at the behest of elitists against the populist, socialist, revolutionary Joe Biden, the proletarian hero Joe Biden. They hated him because of what he presented. They hated him for what he represented, a working class movement. I thought that it was racist to say Joe Biden should step aside for a, black woman, but still, it's racist for Joe Biden to step aside. What the hell's going on?
Bad direction. New Mexico Minnesota, Virginia, New Hampshire, a lot of states that were not in play leading up to the debate, suddenly more than in play for Donald Trump. So what happens?
Yeah, Joe, and I think one thing that happened yesterday was as we were on this yesterday morning talking about the kind of extraordinary, kind of orchestrated a series of things that happened the day before. Yesterday, the kind of there was a little bit of a feeding frenzy around this, and I think that especially with President Biden having COVID and being in Rehoboth. The din, the kind of the clamor on cable news, I think for some people around President Biden started to feel kind of disrespectful, and that there was not a world where he, in an isolated state, where he was sick, I'm not trying to overblow it, but I think there was a little bit of an effort on the part of some people around the Biden campaign to kind of put the brakes, especially when some very specific reporting, people started making very specific claims about timetables and that the decision had been made and there was a timetable and here was what he was going to do. And I don't know about the quality of some of that reporting, but I'll say that they pushed back hard on some of that. And I think it kind of got overboard with them in that regard. And they wanted to throw a brushback pitch and sort of say, President Biden needs time, still needs some time, especially given the fact that he's ill. It is the case that the factors that you, Mika and I and everybody else in the show talked about yesterday did not get better yesterday. And by that, I mean, some very basic things. How do you run a presidential campaign without any money? That problem got worse yesterday because donors, and again, say what you want to say about them, have now gone to the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee and basically said, we're not just shutting off Joe Biden right now. We're going to shut off the congressional campaigns because your guys' job is, from our point of view, is to talk sense to Joe Biden. And if you can't talk sense to Joe Biden, why are we if we're not going to give him money because we think he has no path and he's going to drag, we believe, on the basis of the metrics that we're looking at, I'm speaking as a fake donor here, he's going to drag you down. Why should we throw good money after bad into a lost cause in the House and Senate? So we're not talking about donors flexing their muscles in a way that threatens not just the reelection campaign of the president, but also all of those people who are running for reelection or seeking election in the Democratic caucus in the House and Senate. And so that has exacerbated the problem.
I literally never thought in my entire life that I would be in a position where I'm in agreement with like elite Democratic Party donors, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, the damn near entirety of the mainstream media apparatus, David Axelrod, Barack Obama, standing against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, and Ilhan Omar. Like, what the f is happening? Broken clock is right twice a day. The libification, yeah, the why I left the left moment, I know. It's actually the supremely leftist thing to do. The supremely leftist thing to do is ensure that a genocidaire who's 850,000 years old, for simply malicious and spiteful and selfish reasons, stays in the race because it's his time, and then he loses to a out and about fascist. What's really annoying to me about all of this is that, like, God, the donors have so much power. I feel like the more they talk about the donors, the more people are going to polarize against pushing Biden out, because they're like, well, if the donors want them, then f you and f the donors. Now I'm riding with Biden. You know what I mean?
And some of the things that how.
No, they're mad at Biden because they can't control him. He's an independent force in the DNC, and with him gone, the Pelosi-Schumer dominance has no opposition. The Schumer dominance. I hope you're trying to make a joke and you're not being serious, right? Kamala won't be as progressive as Biden, though. All of this is making me support Biden instead. They'll replace Biden in someone they can't control. Can't you see that? Why are you making like QAnon conspiracies for Biden? And in your QAnon conspiracy for like Biden being this, like, this is blue MAGA. You know that, right? Like the idea that like Trump actually is not a representation of like exactly what the deep state is supposed to do, and instead like a brave, bold fighter against the deep state. Like, you're doing that for Biden right now because I trust AOC and Bernie. So if Biden drops out and AOC and Bernie say, okay, well, GG's, you know, we tried. Kamala Harris is great. Will you forget how you feel about Kamala Harris? Don't put any blind confidence in a singular person, let alone a politician. That's insane. You can also, like I said, even go so far as saying you love certain politicians, you love their legacy, and still vehemently disagree with them. I've done that with Bernie Sanders quite a bit. Okay. Are you not going to the auction because it started 40 minutes ago? I am going to the auction. I'm finishing this food and then I'm going to the auction. I told Connor I'd be a little late.
How grave that problem is rapidly becoming very clear. So that pressure is still very much on. And I think that, and then as you said, some of the polling numbers, as they become increasingly public, and I would just focus on one thing in particular, where some of these numbers, forget about what you think about battleground state horse race numbers. The attribute numbers, the number now that about whether President Biden is fit for office, those numbers are getting to the point where they're quite scary, and you can't. It's very difficult to be reelected president if upwards of 80% of voters in the country don't think you're equipped for office, and so there's polling around that I know the Biden team, Schumer, Pelosi, Obama, all those people have seen just in the past few days that say that. And those numbers are, not only are they bad, but they're very hard to turn around. It's hard to imagine how you're going to turn that around going forward.
Right. So Mika, just to underline a couple of things that John said, that's nailed it. The biggest issue, immediate issue, is money. The donors have stopped giving money.
I'm just confused because Biden said he'll do it without them. That was really funny when he was like, yeah, I'll do it without the donors then. And then immediately 50% of the donations dried up because obviously even more than 50% of donations of the campaign is coming from the omega wealthy. Like, what are we talking about, dude? There is no grassroots mobilization in this country, let alone for someone like Joe Biden. As far as Kamala Harris versus Joe Biden goes on progressive legislation, like, I don't put a lot of emphasis on what a California senator did in their tenure, okay? But Kamala Harris has a relatively progressive track record, especially because she was a senator when Trump was president. And when Trump was president, she could make bold declarative statements about how much of a Marxist proletarian revolutionary she is because they knew they had no power. In that process, she actually voted for a shit ton of progressive legislation. So if the metrics of your measurement for the boundaries of like whether you think a politician is good or not is their track record, then Kamala Harris is literally more progressive than Joe Biden. It's not even a question. I don't trust that regardless, though. One thing that I can point to, however, is that Kamala Harris has better instincts than Joe Biden in this process because post October 7, especially a couple months in, she openly and also through quote unquote leaks was fielding the media on her position on a ceasefire in Gaza. She literally was outflanking Joe Biden. That is actually unique. You don't really hear that. You don't really see that normally. Okay. So that is like one of the only instances. That is one of the only instances where I've looked at something and went, I think Kamala Harris might be trying to separate herself from the top of the ticket a little bit, at least on this issue. And that to me shows good political instinct. Terrible instincts? You think that's bad? Are you kidding me? Talking about ceasefire in Gaza like 3 months before Joe Biden ever even brought forward a three-phase negotiation process, which he's never like followed through on, by the way, is literally is actually very good. At worst, it shows that Kamala Harris recognizes that there's a youth vote contingency out there and a, Dearborn voter contingency out there that desperately needs to hear something that is, something that speaks to the humanity of those who are being lost to this genocide. Kind of see the point of progressives now. As you said, they're betting on a dead horse with a low chance of winning and actually doing what he said. But what are the odds of a president even mentioning progressive policies? Probably even lower. No, I don't think it's that low. I think that all of the other possible members are going to, because of Joe Biden's track record, whoever comes after Joe Biden is going to either A, be just as progressive as Joe Biden, which is not a lot, or B, be more progressive than Joe Biden because Joe Biden wasn't all that progressive to begin with. So your guys are wrong on that front. Like, Joe Biden's legislative agenda has been more progressive than Democratic presidents have passed. But that is actually not a consequence of Joe Biden's own personal conviction. That is a consequence of what the material conditions look like and what the demands are. It's kind of like this. Republicans used to lie about climate change. They still lie, but they used to lie back then as well. But now Republicans at least have to vote for hardening our infrastructure against some of the most damaging aspects of climate change because that part is unavoidable. That's something that people in Texas are experiencing right now. You know what I mean? Legislators might say it's the Chinese conspiracy, but it still doesn't change the reality that you need to put funds in at least some kind of climate change combating infrastructure hardening initiative. Okay, that's why Republicans have moved beyond like, oh, we're spending too much money on this shit. It's made up. It's gay. It's fake. Chinese people made it up. To, yeah, Chinese people made it up, but we will vote for this infrastructure hardening. We will actually demand money to you know, protect our voters and the people that live in this region. So it became unavoidable in many respects for any administration that would come into power to not do any kind of like IRA style bill. That's the reason why Joe Biden was more progressive than previous presidents. And he went above that too in some respects, for sure. But having said all of this, the likelihood that whoever comes after Joe Biden will be more progressive than he is, I mean, it's pretty high. He's an 800-year-old center-right Democratic Party creature.
It's almost completely ground down to a halt. The story of Jeffrey Katzenberg telling President Biden this got eclipsed from the COVID diagnosis. So that is a problem. I will say also, you got a lot of information yesterday. There was a lot of information, a lot of off-the-record conversations, a lot of plans being made about President Biden moving toward getting out of the race this weekend. That stopped when there was some very specific reporting later in the afternoon. Mark Halprin being very specific on some reporting that other reporters, newspapers and networks had parts of that reporting, but not all of it together. I think at that point is when we started to see the campaign pushing back, because what people close to Joe Biden have said all along is he's a man of great pride. He can be stubborn and tough. Don't back him into the corner. If he's going to do this, let him do it his way on his time frame. And when all of these reports started coming out, that's when the campaign started pushing back. And I think part of that is giving him the space to make this decision, to finish making this decision with his family this weekend.
He's also a man of faith and a man of tremendous historic accomplishment. And look, it's impossible to ignore where this is going and exactly what started it. I'm not unaware of that. At the same time, I still believe that you don't know what you have until it's gone, and that there will be that feeling at some point.
You think there'll be if he leaves the race, you think Democrats will regret it?
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
He said and had to correct himself.
People in Gaza.
Yeah, Kamala Harris gave the speech back in March, recognized the situation in Gaza, and this community gave her some credit at the time. I was here. Yep. Who the is going to be like, oh man, you know, you don't know what you got till it's gone. You paved paradise and put up a parking lot. You swapped out an 800-year-old guy for someone who is at least a little bit more dynamic and younger and more coherent. Who would be a good VP pick if they went with her? A white man. A white man from a white man from a state that is like either like a red state, or a white man from a state that is a swing state. Not a woman. People saying AOC. Hopefully not Pete Buttigieg either. Mark Kelly, Andy Bashar. I know that what I'm saying also implies John Fetterman. I would die if that happened.
I'm against charter schools. They are wrong for our Commonwealth. They take taxpayer dollars away from the already underfunded public schools.
My dick has never been harder than hearing a Kentucky accent say the words, "I'm against charter schools. They take away dollars from public schools." This is pornography for me. This is pornographic material. I have never nutted so hard in my life.
In the Commonwealth. And our taxpayer dollars should not be redirected to for-profit entities that run charter schools. As Attorney General, I can tell you the number of prosecutions we had against for-profit colleges, how so many of them took advantage of so many people, and the idea that we would open up that same ability.
Someone said this is like the socialists of the 30s. Yeah, he needs to just say the N-word to finalize the equation. Okay? If he was like, and black people should go to separate schools, then it's like that he's the perfect Southern Democrat.
For people to prey on our even younger students is simply not the direction Kentucky should go.
There's so much talent in the Democratic Party, man. Kamala and Andy could be running an insanely high energy campaign with 3 states in a day each. FYI, completely cool with Shapiro or Cooper or any other person she picks. I don't think it'll be Andy Bashar. Kentucky's not a state he can carry. I mean, he is pretty popular. If Biden ends his re-election campaign, Democrats get a new presidential nominee. Arizona U.S. Senator Mark Kelly is among the names circulating as a possible running mate for Kamala Harris. Yeah, it has to be a white man. 100%. It is literally the Barack Obama equation, but this time even worse because one, Kamala is nowhere near as charismatic as Barack Obama, and also she's a woman. These are definitely things that voters will look at. I don't know if it's Mark Kelly, but it will be a white man. Why not Newsom? Kamala is already from California. Gavin Newsom is not as popular as a standalone figure as people think he is. Why not Big Gretch? Because she's a woman. Dude, what are we talking about? So what if she's a woman is ridiculous, dude. Two woman ticket? Like, I mean, I'd love it. I like Gretchen Whitmer. But 2-woman ticket is like, let's not forget that 52% of white women voted for Donald Trump. That's number one. Number two, the difference between the percentage of white women voting for Biden over Trump is far smaller than the difference between the percentage of men voting for Trump over Biden. Because women also are incredibly misogynistic. Women have a shit ton of internalized misogyny. We're talking about Republican women specifically. They will absolutely go, a woman, 2 women as president? Get the fuck out of here. Anyway, he also took pictures of the attendees at a rally. One such group he posed with was the so-called Derby City Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, a group of drag queens who describe themselves as the Order of Sacred Clown Nuns whose goal is to bring education and awareness about the LGBTQ community. This was a harmless picture with a harmless group providing, if nice, a symbolic show of solidarity between the new governor and his constituents. And it drove Republicans insane. At a political event held a week after the Fairness Campaign's rally, Philip Wheeler, a Republican state senator from Eastern Kentucky, had a temper tantrum about the photo. Walking from person to person, he showed his constituents the picture of his phone and ranted about how Bashir was trying to corrupt children and defiled the state capitol. He and other Republicans in a trap. He and other Republicans may have thought that they caught Bashir in a trap, one that could evaporate his support among the many socially conservative white working class voters who brought him into office the year prior. The governor certainly didn't think so. When asked about Wheeler's comments, Bashir reiterated his pride in being the first Kentucky governor to go to a gay rights rally. This could have been a way for him to sidestep around Wheeler's comments, but he avoided doing so. Bashir went on to declare that he would absolutely take that picture again because those were Kentuckians who were here at their capital. That brings a tear to my eye thinking about. He brought up that Wheeler had made racist comments in the past and accused him of now making significant homophobic comments. Then he demanded that Wheeler give an apology to every single person in that picture and that he do it personally. His allies then called on Wheeler to immediately resign. That right there is a Democrat who fights. That's Kentucky's Democratic governor, chat. That is Kentucky's Democratic and, dare I say, very popular governor. No, it's not unique to have a blue governor in a red state or a red governor in a blue state. That happens all the time. The governorship, the gubernatorial race is one that is often like deeply personal. It's the one issue where it's the one race where most voters vote for the person and not the party affiliation. Okay? Historically, that has always been the case. But the fact that he's in Kentucky, he's popular, and also a Democrat and does shit like this is pretty significant. Anyway, is there any real reason why Kamala wouldn't be a great pick for the Dems? She's an outwardly well-spoken, unifying candidate. What do you mean unifying candidate? She's just like, ultimately, for the past 4 years, she has deliberately been presented as a non-entity. It's at best a little bit of an advantage now because the Republicans haven't really shifted their focus on her at all throughout that entire process. But obviously, that is also part of the reason why she doesn't have a shit ton of name recognition. And the people that do know her as like the person who was an absolute abysmal failure during the primary where she lost her own state and is a massive charisma suck. Like, you know, all of the mamala jokes aside, yeah, the only reason why she is presented as like a solid pick right now is because of what the alternative is. The alternative is a carcass. So yes, in comparison to the carcass, she can speak, and that's it. And considering that plenty of people are willing to vote for a carcass, they're obviously going to vote for someone who can speak better than the carcass. All right, let's hear what Chuck Todd had to say about Biden's chances, and then we're going to move on to the shooter again.
At this stage, I mean, where do you think we are in this? Will he or won't he pass the torch?
Look, I think now it's impossible for Biden to stay in.
Yeah.
Even if he wants to stay
We watched this yesterday.
in because there's too many Democrats on the record saying he needs to get out. They question whether he can serve another term. How do they suddenly put that toothpaste back in the tube? Let's say they do it, and you try to put Biden out there. How do these people answer the question in their own political debates, in their own interviews with local television and with bloggers and with podcasts and all of with regular voters? They're sitting here right now, basically the leaders of the Democratic Party making the case to the country, this man cannot serve another 4 years. Hard stop. By the way, we don't think he can win, but many of them are simply saying he can't serve another 4 years. How do they flip that? So at this point, essentially, he's been forced off because I don't think we're getting to the point where I don't think he can win the nomination with his own delegates. Okay. He's losing control of that process too. So I'm not going to get into his head. But, you know, this is going to be there's only Hunter Biden and Joe Biden left to tell him it's pretty clear to me that many of the non-relatives have come to a certain conclusion. People with the last name of Biden have not.
Yeah, it's
that's where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Which is what you would expect in Biden world.
I was going to say, ultimately, it is going to be a conversation and decision that he makes with family, right?
That's right. And, you know, he's at home. He's in Rehoboth. All the family's there. So, you know, is it this weekend? But this is unsustainable, and now his campaign is unwinnable.
Can you set?
Yeah, the emperor has no clothes. What's important here is that Todd, who definitely has established Democratic connections, has some information that there could be a delegate revolt if Biden refuses to step aside. It would be the most chaotic. Like, I think Biden's chances of winning right now, if I were to tier list, like, what happens next in terms of, like, chances of winning, I would say the absolute worst thing that can happen is like contested convention, delegate chaos, Biden doesn't step aside, and the DNC is just like lit on fire basically with this drama. Okay, that would be the one, like that would be a 100% lock for Donald Trump. Like, I'm not talking 99%. I'm talking 100% lock. Donald Trump wins. Donald Trump actually not only wins, but the down ballot races also turn in the favor of the Republican Party as well. He's got this. He's got a red Senate, a red House. The White House is red. Everything's red. Project 2025 is looking like silliness. Okay, they move beyond that. You get the broad popular mandate. Okay, that's the absolute worst thing that can happen. The second worst thing that can happen is if Biden stays in the race and loses and a similar outcome occurs, okay? The best possible outcome of this is a swift change in the ticket. Biden steps down honorably and says, like, it's time for a younger voice to move my legacy further. I made tremendous accomplishments in the last 4 years. I've been a legislator for 50. Okay, I've been around quite a long time, and it's time for a new generation to bring about the change that will actually help Americans. Okay, that is the best possible outcome, the best possible scenario. The Democrats immediately move on with their messaging and shift their focus on Kamala winning the election. They pick a vice president that is good, balanced, reasonable, probably a white guy, a white man, cisgender, heterosexual white man, and we move on. Like an Andy Bashir type person, or maybe even Josh Shapiro, but probably not. Mark Kelly, sure. I know you're. There's a lot of Mark Kelly heads. That's another one potentially. Kamala has 0% chance. Easily the worst retail politician ever. Yeah. If Joe Biden at this stage is in a 49-51 deadlock against Donald Trump, and he has no retail instincts that remain because his brain has deteriorated, Kamala Harris is going to be a little bit better than Joe Biden as a retail politician. You are crazy if you think that. It's like we're talking about a race right now where it is the Democrats' race to lose, and they are losing, okay? It's the Democrats' race to lose, and they're losing. So there's no downsides, only upsides, as long as this swap occurs with expediency and with the swiftness that it deserves because time is running out. Trump is not a good candidate. Trump is a weak candidate. Trump is the weakest possible candidate for the Republicans. He is one that the Republicans can't actually cast aside. They tried, they failed because the base wants him. But the base is increasingly more unhinged. This is not even just a simple Trump problem. This is just a Republican Party problem in general. You can say, nah, that's copium, but obviously we have a cadaver. We have a cadaver in charge right now. A cadaver that has completely capitulated to a genocidal nation that is also demonstrating his worst possible instincts in terms of his reelection chances. And even then, it's a 50-50 split, cutting in Trump's direction, of course. That implies that Donald Trump is very weak. You're crazy. Come on, guys. And it's because 67% of Biden supporters don't care about Biden. They just don't want Trump to be president. This is the exact same dynamic of the 2020 election, except the difference is Joe Biden has now been president for 4 years. Okay, a lot of chaos ensued in the minds of Americans that still remember their negative real wage growth. And not only that, but also on top of that, his mental faculties have diminished even further. His mental faculties were obviously diminished in terms of, in comparison to his 2016 appearances on television, but they've gotten to a point where it's like impossible not to recognize. It's Jover. Crazy how you have to keep saying this. You've been saying this for 4 years now. I know. What? Why not just sit this one out? Let the libs deal with it. Not our right. You mean not our fight, which is pretty funny. I'm a political commentator. My job is to make sense of the chaos that you're experiencing and try to describe to you what the motivations are, what the ambitions are of each individual candidate, why they're moving in a direction that they're moving in. That's what I do. Okay? Are you dumb? Trump might win. Trump being a weak candidate for the Republicans does not change the dynamic that he might win. Yeah, I'm looking at the polls. Okay? Yes, Trump has a pretty decent chance of winning right now. But when you look at the races, especially in key states, okay, in swing states, and you look at must-win states, for example, where Biden is deadlocked or even losing to Donald Trump by a couple points, and you look at the down-ballot races and like the Democratic candidates have remained strong there, that to me spells one thing, and that is people are not invested in the president, but they don't mind the Democratic Party. They don't mind the Democratic Party's candidates in their down ballot races. They just simply do not like this cadaver.
Campaign officials and his advisors have also hit going to TV shows and also really making this case that they have no plans to support an alternative nominee and that they stand firm behind Biden. And really, they had a phone call just earlier today where even they were talking to campaign officials and really trying to...
Oh, by the way, this is a pretty solid way to try to lock Biden in. for the record, and also shift the blame over to the entirety of the Democratic Party. If Joe Biden doesn't have the cognitive function to run for re-election, then he certainly doesn't have the cognitive function to remain as commander-in-chief. How can any of them pushing him to drop out of the presidential race argue in good faith that he should stay on as POTUS? That is a pretty solid way to try to lock Joe Biden in. If the vice presidential candidate is running with this narrative specifically to try to lock Joe Biden into the candidacy, perhaps that should ring some alarm bells in the minds of people. Okay? So, people need to. Mark Halperin, he's got another take after yesterday. He hasn't stopped. This man, holy shit. When Joe Biden will announce his retirement, the decisions Joe Biden faces now as he moves to end his presidential campaign and his career are personally and professionally painful for him. He's the reason why yesterday so many chatters were coming in here and being like, Asmongold said Biden dropped out. He's the reason why so many normies were texting me being like, wait, Joe Biden dropped out already? And now he's come out with another banger. He's a Newsmax commentator. And I don't think that his reporting was correct, especially because some of the stuff that he said yesterday was insane. Joe Biden's going to drop out before this weekend ends. Fine. That is probably true. Okay. That's what I thought as well. I would never say that that is a certainty, and I would never say breaking news, Joe Biden is dropping out this weekend. There's a difference between saying that and saying, in my estimation, Joe Biden's likelihood of dropping out this weekend is pretty high. But then he followed through and said that there would be an open convention, a contested convention, and that Joe Biden would not endorse Kamala Harris, which is insane. Okay? Like that he was not going to endorse Kamala Harris. He was going to drop out and not endorse Kamala Harris. Come on. Based on my reporting and having covered and watched Joe Biden for decades, it's pretty clear what's happening. Nancy Pelosi, yeah, he used to be a Newsmax regular, or no, MSNBC regular, but he's at Newsmax now because he I think he called Obama a dick or something, and then they dropped him. He was at Huffington Post as well. Anyway, that's where you go to die when your career is done, because you've like defended your brother who is like done sexual harassment, for example. Apparently, he also had SA allegations. Is that what it is? He's a sex pest. Anyway, again, Newsmax is like the liberal version of that. That's where the libs go. Or is it News Nation? I'm it up. I forget. I don't care about these outlets. Newsmax is the hog. Newsmax is Hog Central. News Nation is the place you go to. Like Chris Cuomo's at News Nation. Newsmax is hog. It's like OAN, far right, Trumper shit. He was only suspended for a month from MSNBC for saying Obama was being a bit of a dick when he was on Morning Joe. Oh, NBC and MSNBC sacked him over harassment allegations in 2017. Got it. Anyway, let's continue. I got more. Nancy Pelosi is forcing Biden's hand. This is true. She's gone out of her way so far to make this process as painless for him as possible. Also true, but she knows him well enough to know that he's one of the world's worst and slowest decision makers. Someone who will delay as long as possible before picking a path among unattractive options, which means she will do whatever it takes now to get the right forcing mechanisms in place. The Rainbow Coalition of new members of Congress coming out against Biden today is another series of turtles on fence posts. The message is clear. Do what needs to be done now, Joe, or the level of pain will be ratcheted up. Okay, this analysis is correct, even though it's coming from Mark Halperin. Amongst the many paradoxes and ironies in play now are that these new applications of pain will produce more of the kind of embarrassments and humiliations that are amongst the most painful aspects of the experience for the president. And another paradox, those feelings will make Biden less likely to be willing to reach decision day because they make him angry. So Pelosi will likely have to break him fully to get him to act. A little pain won't work. Biden faces many decisions now. I mean, this is Ezra Klein said similar things yesterday, and I agree with Ezra Klein on that. Okay? Biden is a very vindictive man. Biden has not forgotten that he would have won in 2016 if it wasn't for Barack Obama telling him not to run. Okay? That is a real point of contention here for him. I can't believe that we're having this conversation that is so, like, this is a world-changing decision, and it's being and it's being talked about on the boundaries of the individual's own personal mania and their narcissistic desires and how spiteful they are. It's crazy. But that is the reality right now, okay? The reality right now is that Biden genuinely feels like he has always been cast aside. He's been called a dumbass. He's been called a brain-dead loser since the beginning of his political career 50 years ago. That part is true. They used to always make fun of him. He had to drop out of the race in disgrace because he was outed as a serial plagiarist, okay? Back when things like that would hurt your chances of election. Obviously, we are so far past that point now, but that is the reason why he is hyper defensive and hypersensitive. When he comes out and says things like, oh, they always tell me I was going to lose and then I win and I win and win and win over and over again. They always say I'm the underdog. Okay. I'm the underdog, Jack. Like when he says stuff like that, he means it. He is being for real. That is his genuine opinion. That's not just a narrative that he has designed because he actually thinks that's like a winning narrative. That is something that he actually believes. He genuinely thinks that they always have casted him aside, even though he's a brilliant legislator, even though he wasn't, okay? And that finally, this is his time. This is his time to shine. And he believes in his own mind that for the past 4 years, he's been able to accomplish many of the agenda items that he ran on. And in terms of past performance of like Democratic leadership or Republican leadership, but specifically Democratic leadership, like what they promise and what they end up achieving, Joe Biden actually does hit decent marks. So he thinks in his mind, like, what the f are you guys talking about? I passed the IRA. That's a massive bipartisan bill. To him, that's like a unimaginable legislative accomplishment. He thinks, oh, I passed a bipartisan gun control bill, which was marginal. It was ineffective. It doesn't matter. But in his mind, he's like, that's like a huge thing that I did. How the f do people not, how the f are people still doubting me is his opinion. He's looking at the 2022 midterm election, which Republicans lost due to the Supreme Court and due to their hyper focus on like insane trans panic defenses and like crime is out of control arguments and narratives. Okay. And he's thinking like, I won that. I actually am the reason why the red wave that was supposed to happen became a red puddle, because that's a, you know, that can be seen as like approval of the current administration. Okay. And it's funny because like Republicans lost that midterm because of obviously Roe v. Wade and obviously because of Donald Trump and how hyper extremist his hand selected candidates were, like genuinely repulsive candidates. Guys, Josh Shapiro beat a dude who was like a straight up QAnon freak. Okay. The Pennsylvania gubernatorial race was between a guy who like would hold up a sword and be like, I'm QAnon and this is my sword that I will wage war with, versus Josh Shapiro. Do you understand? Like, I think we kind of forgot how nutty, openly nutty the Republicans were in 2022. That was the reason why the Republicans were trying to get Donald Trump out of the equation. That's why they were like, we got to get DeSantis in. We have to get DeSantis in. Donald Trump is poison for moderates. And they were right. What they were obviously wrong on, however, is that it's not just Donald Trump that's poison for moderates. It's that the attitude from the broad majority of Americans was that the Republican Party has gotten out of control. Okay? You are entirely too close to the Supreme Court decision that took away the reproductive rights of half the population in this country for you to actually be able to, for you to actually retriangulate your position as like a moderate party. You can't do that. Trump is a very weak candidate. However, having said that, he's also the only candidate that could like at least bring his base back into the fold. What? He said he killed your dog and you did nothing but cried about it? What are you, bro? Okay, take your medication, please. Please take your medication, chatter. Your medication order is up, okay? You have forgotten to take your medication this morning. Please take it. Take your meds, all right? You will feel better, I promise. You are currently hallucinating in this chat. Anyway, let's continue. Are you going to Connor's auction or just video calling in? No, I am going to Connor's auction. Should he endorse or not endorse Vice President Harris? The plan was for him not to endorse in order to create it. Oh, he's just like running defense for his like earlier statements, dude. In order to create the appearance of Harris earning this on her own and creating distance between her and her unpopular boss. But some Harris advocates, many women, were infuriated by my reporting on Thursday and say it'd be disrespectful of Biden not to give his the full-throated backing. Yeah, this doesn't make any sense. I don't know why I'm reading this. Okay, I'm done. I'm done reading this thing. Okay. Maybe Harris doesn't want it. You guys are crazy. What are you talking about? Biden is going to announce at auction. I will die. If Biden announces that he's dropping out while I'm at the CDOGVA auction, I will die. I will perish on the spot. You will watch me die on camera. I'm going to be honest. The biggest issue I see by Democrats is not addressing rural communities. They've abandoned them. I also never see you talking about them either. Yeah, you're wrong about that. I talk about that shit all the time. I talk about the lack of access to like adequate healthcare, like no hospitals, no social safety nets regularly in rural communities. Democrats are never winning rural communities though. Like that's just, you know, that's just not happening. Anyway, Chatter saw this QRT tweet, I think. Yeah, okay, let's continue. Bro, you talk about West Virginia more than anyone else. What is this guy talking about? Yeah, I don't know. I've also spent like the last 2 days specifically talking about Appalachia because of JD Vance, of JD Vance Refrigeration. Like that's also another like legitimate reason as to why I've been talking about it more than I normally do even. Anyway.